So, are people still mad about ThunderCats Roar? Is it finally safe to talk about it? Screw it, I'm doing it anyway. ThunderCats Roar was a short-lived comedic reboot of the ThunderCats franchise and the property's first cartoon since its similarly short-lived, but much edgier 2011 series. It was announced in summer of 2018 with a less than stellar reception. The internet absolutely eviscerated it for its simplistic character designs and having a much more comedic tone when compared to previous installments of the franchise. Because God forbid the show about cat people fighting a magic mummy is the least bit silly. In all seriousness though, I generally do get why those who grew up with either the 85 or 2011 cartoon would be turned off by the approach that ThunderCats Roar decided to take, especially in regards to its looser, more simplistic character designs. Personally, I was indifferent towards the show's announcement, since I never cared about ThunderCats as a property, with my only other exposure to it being that one death battle between He-Man and Lion-O. That said, my God, with the sheer level of outrage and pure vitriol Roar's announcement generated, you'd think the creator murdered a puppy or something. The weeks following the show's trailer were a special kind of hell for the cartoon community. Legions of man-children took to YouTube and Twitter, calling for the heads of the people behind ThunderCats Roar for apparently ruining their childhoods, even though the show wasn't even out yet, and we only had a brief trailer to go by. And the other ThunderCats cartoons were still there, untouched. But it's the internet. What do you expect? Maturity? Rationale? Not getting upset over a children's cartoon simply for existing? Dear Lord, was this an embarrassing time to be an animation fan. And that's not even getting into the infamous CalArts style debacle. I'm sorry, but I need to go off about how utterly stupid this whole controversy was. For the lucky few of you who don't know, first off, I envy you. Second, CalArts style is basically a term used to describe current trends in modern cartoons art styles, such as characters having bean-shaped mouths and thin outlines. While the origin of the term CalArts style can be traced as far back as the early 2010s, it became popularized with the announcement of ThunderCats Roar, after many fans lamented how the show decided to follow a thin-lined art style similar to many popular 2010s cartoons. Now, simply disliking the look of Roar or preferring the character designs of previous shows would be perfectly fine. Only for some reason, most everyone who seriously used the term CalArts style used it exclusively to claim that all cartoons today were derivative of one another, and that any cartoon that fit the characteristics of the CalArts style was inherently cheap and lazy. Unlike the glorious 1980s, back when all cartoons were creative and looked unique and totally weren't mostly cheap glorified toy commercials. Not only is the way people tend to use CalArts style disrespectful to those who attended and graduated from CalArts, which was founded by Walt Disney by the way, but to dismiss all current cartoons as being identical and lazy for having similar elements in their character designs is just a straight up uneducated claim. Yes, a lot of cartoons today follow similar design trends, such as the bean-shaped mouths and thin outlines that were common in the 2010s. But that statement is literally true for every decade of animation. Even then, despite many cartoons having similarities in their character designs, they often have at least some subtle differences to them that make them identifiable from each other. Not to mention the myriad of cartoons that stray away from the current art style trends. Listen, it's fine to prefer some art styles over others, but it's closed-minded to claim that all cartoons from a certain era are objectively lazy and identical. Just like how not every single cartoon of the 1980s was a cheap cash grab, not every cartoon today looks exactly the same. Also, whatever validity the CalArts style criticism had has basically evaporated at this point, since it's basically become shorthand for, I think new cartoon bad, but I don't have the capacity to provide any meaningful criticism, so I'm just going to say it's CalArts and call it a day. Like, there are people who call She-Ra and the Princess of Power CalArts, despite the fact that its character designs don't remotely meet the internet's definition of the CalArts style. CalArts style literally doesn't mean anything anymore. It's a nothing criticism. Most of the shows that people are calling CalArts style weren't even made by people who graduated from CalArts. What are we even doing?
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
And get this, do you want to know who coined the term CalArts style in the first place? John K. You know, John K., the egomaniacal douche who treats his staff like crap. John K., the man who hasn't made anything of worth since the 1990s. John K., who took 7 years to make Cans Without Labels, one of the most embarrassing pieces of animation ever made. John K., the actual confirmed pedophile and rapist. Yes, this is a man who you should be quoting when discussing animation. What's even worse is that when the creator of hit show Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon used the term CalArts style, he wasn't criticizing the beam-mouth look that a lot of current cartoons have been using. The term was used as a criticism against CalArts itself, accusing the university of simply teaching students to be derivative of the visual style of Disney films in their art, because good old Johnny Boy is an idiot and a bitter asshole who thinks he's better than everyone. Look, all I'm saying is that if you're going to follow the words of a washed-up has-been, an actual sexual predator, at least get the context right. I kid you not, the backlash against the so-called CalArts style got so intense and widespread that someone actually threatened to shoot up CalArts, leading the school to shut down for the day. Again, all of this over a trailer for a stupid kids cartoon reboot. And do you know what the funny part is? After all of the backlash, all of the absolute vitriol the internet threw its way, people immediately forgot about this show a couple of months after its premiere. Unlike something like Teen Titans Go, which managed to find a large audience despite online backlash, ThunderCats Roar just never caught on. Roar was barely advertised by CN and had very few reruns, with the second half of the series getting completely burned off with little fanfare. And because virtually no one cared about Roar after it came out, people had no further incentive to rag on it for cheap online clout, and went back to ranting about She-Ra for the 50th time. So now that you all understand just how wild the controversy surrounding this show was, as well as the widely negative reception it received, it'll probably come as absolutely no surprise to anyone watching that I think that ThunderCats Roar is actually pretty okay and doesn't deserve the heat that it gets. There! I said it! The truth has been revealed! I know, what a great take to have for my first serious YouTube video! I just ended my internet career before it could even begin. My dad was right about me. Damn it! Okay, just hear me out for a second. I can see why more than a few people wouldn't be into ThunderCats Roar. It's by no means a masterpiece or anything. That said, really? This is what people were outraged about? This is the show that earned a 2 out of 10 on IMDb? This was the cartoon that was going to lead to the downfall of Western animation? I mean, come on! Come on, guys! I'm sorry, but after watching the entire show, I don't think that there's anything in ThunderCats Roar that warranted the outrage it got. It's a totally harmless, albeit flawed cartoon that I honestly thought was a pretty alright time. And it's honestly about time someone on YouTube other than Nintendo actually sticks up for this show. So let's get to it. These are my thoughts on ThunderCats Roar and why I don't think it's nearly as bad as people make it out to be. First off, what exactly is ThunderCats Roar about? Well, the premise is pretty simple and not too different from other versions of ThunderCats. The show follows the ThunderCats, a group of cat-like warriors who escape the destruction of their planet and take refuge in Third Earth, which they defend from the likes of the wicked sorcerer Mumra, the evading mutants of the planet Plundar, as well as a myriad of other foes that threaten the peace. Again, the same basic premise as your typical ThunderCats, only with a more comedic twist. The characters of ThunderCats Roar aren't anything special, but they're likable for what they are. The ThunderCats themselves are fun, good-natured goofballs who manage to work off of each other pretty well. Granted, I can see some being annoyed with how much of an idiot man-child Lion-O is. Especially with his backstory of being a young teen accidentally aged up to be an adult absent in this show. That said, I personally find Lion-O to be too good-natured and optimistic for me to dislike. Out of all the ThunderCats, Tigra is probably my personal favorite. He tries so hard to be a good and helpful mentor, but literally no one respects him. Fortunately, it's clear that the rest of the team cares about him, and the jokes at his expense rarely feel too excessive or mean. I feel like Roar's take on Snarf really deserves a special mention. Not only is this version of Snarf an adorable pet like in ThunderCats 2011, but, and I kid you not, he's a freaking robot who can shoot lasers and fly.
Wow, Snarf, it looks like you're a robot.
I'm not going to lie, I genuinely lost it at that reveal. Not only did ThunderCats Roar make one of the most despised characters in all of animations the cutest thing, but he's useful too. Listen, you can say whatever you want about this show, but if you tell me that Snarf in ThunderCats Roar isn't a precious boy, you are not only lying to me, but you're lying to yourself. Just look at him. I just want to pinch his little cheeks. As for the villains, despite starting out pretty basic, they managed to be endearing in their own right. Mummer makes for an entertaining, goofy bad guy, and his whole gimmick of finding random artifacts to make himself jacked is fun. Also, I love how the show, for some reason, just ships the hell out of Mumra and Tigra. No, I'm serious. These two are super gay and the show doesn't even try to hide it. And honestly, they're kind of adorable together. She-Ra and the Princesses of Power would be proud. There's also the mutants, who are just hilarious in how utterly incompetent they are. Like, their incompetence literally led them to accidentally destroy their own planet. It kind of gets to a point where you genuinely feel bad for these guys. Even the Thundercats feel sorry for them. I mean, they're nothing special, but they make for decent comedy villains. Now let's get to the most controversial aspect of ThunderCats Roar. Its look. And I get it. The character designs are a massive departure from what's normally expected from the franchise, with the characters having a more chibi-ish, deformed look to them, as opposed to having realistic proportions like in previous cartoons. Admittedly, I was sort of put off by the characters' designs at first, but honestly they grew on me over time. I mean, there are times when the characters' expressions can look a bit uncanny, but for the most part I honestly find the character designs appealing. Also, Mumra is just peak character design. I don't care what anyone says. Again, I get the art style isn't for everyone, and you can say anything you want about it, unless it involves the word CalArts or complain that Chitara isn't hot enough like a weirdo. You can't deny that the animation itself is great. The fight scenes in particular are the highlight of the show, with how fun and creative they are and how fluidly they're animated. I'm sorry, but I have no idea how anyone can see scenes like this and come to the conclusion that the artists on the show can't draw. As for the writing, well, like a lot of shows that are just starting out, the early episodes of ThunderCats Roar are honestly pretty rough. I mean, the first few episodes weren't straight up terrible, but I probably would have bailed on this show early on if it weren't for the quality of the fight scenes. The main issue I had with early ThunderCats Roar was its pacing. My god, the first few episodes of this show moved way too fast for my liking. At this point, the show just wouldn't let jokes settle. It constantly felt the need to shove in one joke or a goofy expression after another without rest. It just felt like the show was trying a bit too hard to be goofy. Fortunately, by around the series' quarter mark, Roar's writing does manage to improve quite a bit. While it still occasionally tries too hard to be silly, the comedy is stronger overall, and the pacing is so much better. It even has some light continuity here and there, which I can always appreciate in otherwise episodic cartoons. You can tell that the writers were starting to feel more comfortable with the vibe that they wanted to go for with this show. Another thing to note is that the music is actually pretty rad. I like how Roar uses remixes of the 80s cartoon soundtrack. It's charming and adds to the Saturday morning cartoon vibe it's going for. There are also original vocal tracks, and they're way catchier than they have any right to be. Seriously, songs like Swampy Johnny's song and Groom the Destroyer are actual bops. They are only enhanced by the really fun sequences that accompany them. With all that said, despite my defending of it, I can't say that ThunderCats Roar is an absolute must-watch, mainly because there are a number of shows out there that do what it does, only better. Roar is incredibly similar in terms of tone and style to fellow Cartoon Network shows OKKO Let's Be Heroes and Mau Mau Heroes of Pure Heart, with all three being goofy action comedies that act as send-ups to Saturday morning cartoons of the 80s and 90s. Only difference is that OKKO and Mau Mau have stronger writing and more memorable characters. Also, let's be real. When it comes to more comedic reboots of 80s cartoons, with stellar animation that were unfairly bashed for daring to be different from its previous incarnations, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has the show's number. Now that there is a masterpiece.
He does exactly what I do, but better.
On top of that, the same people behind the show would go on to do Aquaman King of Atlantis, which is essentially ThunderCats Roar style done better. Aquaman makes for a stronger lead than Lion-O, the writing's better, the art style is more refined, and while it has a similarly silly tone, King of Atlantis doesn't overdo it with the goofiness like Roar could at times. All with animation that's on par with Roar's. Also, it has Dana Snyder as Ocean Master. You can't go wrong with that.
Help me! Oh, help me! Oh, help!
Overall, while ThunderCats Roar takes a bit of time to find a rhythm to it, and doesn't quite do enough to stand out from the crowd of other action comedy cartoons, I still think it's an enjoyable show for what it is. I'd personally give it like a solid 6 or 7 out of 10. It's nothing amazing, but a fun time regardless. Again, this isn't me saying that anyone who doesn't like it has a poop mouth with poop opinions. I can definitely see why some people weren't into Roar. That said, my god, it's not worth getting upset over. If it wasn't the kind of ThunderCats cartoon you wanted, That's fine. But at the end of the day, Roar is a harmless, silly kids cartoon. And the fact that its very existence enraged grown adults to the point of harassing and threatening the people behind it is just super embarrassing. Not unexpected, but embarrassing nonetheless. The other shows are still there for you to watch. This isn't the end of ThunderCats. We're even set to get a movie from the director of Godzilla vs. Kong at some point. Just chill.
But you don't understand.
Drama queen!
I think of
Drama queen!
I know that my stance on ThunderCats Roar isn't exactly the popular opinion to have, but regardless on whether you're a fan or a critic, I think we can all agree on one thing. If Momo and Tiger don't have an enemies to lovers arc in the movie, then what's even the point? Also, I know about Teen Titans Roar, and I still don't forgive Teen Titans Go For It. Okay, bye!